All right, YouTube. Greetings and welcome back once again. This is Amuna Israel Solonomics, but tonight it's gonna be Love Project. I've been on a little bit of chill for a minute, but today, after my nice beautiful rest, I said, hey, let me just take a walk through the tube and see what's really going on. And so I came across a discussion, and I'm gonna play a little bit because as soon as I heard it, like bells started going off in my ears. And for those who may be new to the channel, I realized it's like starting 2016, we read a lot about slave narratives. And one thing that it helped me with is to get a better understanding or a better grasp, I would say, on when someone was just broad brushing the topic because they have a predetermined thought. What I found is that when we go into these areas, it is not beneficial to have a predetermined thought or to layer. It says it's reconnected now. Let me see if I can be heard. One moment. I guess YouTube knows I'm about to go all the way in. Hold on. All right, boom, we could be heard. All right, so that's what happened today. I came across, I said, let me hear what's going on, where the males are talking in the debate sphere or they're building or they're having a conversation. So this particular one I saw on Sarnetta's channel, and it's a discussion. Let me see if it's, okay, it's back. My computer is tripping. Hopefully it doesn't do it anymore, but let me just play this here.
So I guess we're gonna have to start with the history. So when we deal with the origin of the Black Hebrew Israelite theology on people who identify themselves as Jews, I'm gonna start with Williams Crowdy.
When we dealing with they're talking about the origins of quote Black Hebrew Israelites in America, and he says he wants to start with the history, and then he goes on to say when he's going to start with William Crowdy, and I'm going to show right now why that's an issue. If you start with William Crowdy and not studying the time period, not studying what was going on, not studying the consensus of the day, you will come to an errant thought process. I'll continue.
And this will come from the Exodusters movement. So you will have something called the Great Awakening, and in periods of American history that's talking about the revival of religion for certain aspects. So in this part, we are talking about the third and the fourth period. So the Exodusters are dealing with individuals like Pat Singleton, etc., moving from the South to Oklahoma to Guthrie. And
I'm going to stop there because he's going somewhere else. He says he wants to start with William Crowdy. So I'm going to share my screen here. And only just to share some sources that I often don't see come up. This thing is looping. Display capture. All right. Let me know if you guys can hear me clearly. So this is what I came across. But he's not the only one. I hear it often, and I just wanted to submit this for consideration. So when you look up William Saunders Crowdy, just on the surface, he was born in the mid 1800s, okay, in Maryland. That would make, this is 47, 57, just under 2 decades before the end of slavery. And he passes in 1908, okay? So he wasn't long in slavery. But I just want to share some information that culturally, this thought of Israelites and this parallel between what melanated people were experiencing in Israel wasn't just a one-off thought of somebody who had a dream. Okay, this is something that would have been repeated uh, countless times in culture, and I'm going to prove it right now. So I'm going to close this only because I have 50 million tabs open, and I'm going to close this. Let me see what this is. I'm going to close this and close this. All right. So this site is called Doc South. If you were familiar when we were doing the Left Project, you'd have seen me talking about this site a lot. I'm going to show you what the site looks like when you go there. A lot of the slave narratives you can read at this site for free. They have transcribed and uploaded, man, hundreds. It's a gold mine, okay? Documenting the American South. It's docsouth.unc.edu. So a lot of the books that are printed are also here. They have things categorized by collections, by authors, by titles, by subjects, okay? So a couple of years ago, I was on here and I realized that there was a recurring theme as we were going through a lot of the narratives. So I took it upon myself to look up Israelites, okay, in within Doc South itself. And what it does is it goes to, and I'm going to show you right now, all the place that the term comes up, whose story it is, who's saying it. So as you can see, a 34-second search brings up 177 results. Remember, this is a slave documenting, I say slave because it's American South, site. Primary resources. A lot of people say, what's your resource? Primary resources for the study of Southern history and literature and culture. Documenting the American South, or Doc South, is a digital publishing initiative that provides internet access to texts, images, and audio files related to Southern history, literature, and culture. We want to know the culture. We want to know what the people were saying. We want to know what was the thought process of the day. Not what we feel today, what we feel they should have said. Because and there's another thing about history that bugs me out about why we act like we don't understand how history works. Everything is not written down. Whatever you're getting, you're just being able to put together bits and pieces of what occurred. So there has to be a level of, I think, humility when we approach some of these topics, because we're acting as if we don't have the proof. If we don't have the hardcore data, that means it didn't happen. There are things that happen today that people can't figure out, and you have all of the characters living. You have cold case crimes and files and this and that people are trying to get an understanding on, and people are still alive. The witnesses are still alive, and you still can't put it together. So I find that interesting. But nonetheless, this Doc South right here is a gold mine. So I go back because it's a primary resource. For all the people be like, where's the resources? And everybody wants to call everything pseudo and all of this extra stuff. It's extra. Anywho, it pulls back 177 results in 34 seconds. Okay. We did read Henry Box Brown. We read a number of these, but a lot of them we did not read. So you can peruse all of the spaces where Israelite pops up and what they're saying. So I took the liberty to do some of those. And we're going to see if they came before Crowdy. This is 1789. I'm sorry, I closed Crowdy. When was Crowdy born? 1854. An address to all the colored citizens of the United States. When was Crowdy born? 18 who? 54. This is an address by John Meacham in 1789. Within this address, what are you going to find? Discussions or parallels of the experience that melanated people were experiencing with Israel. This idea, this thought process didn't just fall out the sky with William Crowdy. Again, it was parallel, or it was parallel in the church, is parallel out the church, is parallel in everyday conversation. So in this particular space, he says, do not look at this little book with a careless eye, but receive instruction and advice. I want you to take notice that Israel started very far from the promised land, all minds bent the way God told them to go. And then he goes on. My point is in sharing this, because I put it in the title, is talking about parallelism and how this thought was embedded in the minds of the people, always bringing them back to Egypt and back to Moses and back to Joshua, back to the Red Sea and back to Pharaoh. It's always saying, it's always paralleling them, the children of Israel then, and those who are be in Israel's position in that space and time, which would have been melanated people. Israelites in this particular one is mentioned 10 times. And he goes on to talk about Moses. Okay, you can read it at your own discretion because it's just too many to go. When the children of Israel obeyed Moses, and then he goes on talking about the Israelites here and talking about the Israelites here. and talking about the wandering of the Israelites here, and always, always, always making these parallels. This was in the 1700s, talking about Mount Sinai, everything. Now, if you want to read it in context, feel free to do so. My point is that, once again, these parallels were long made before William Crowdy was even born. Okay, here's another one. And that wasn't addressed to colored people, by the way, if we missed the topic on that one. An autobiographical Bond and Free, or Yearnings for Freedom, from the Greenbrier House, being the story of my life in bondage and my life in freedom, by Campbell Israel. This person that was actually even named Israel. And then you're going to go 84 times because the person's name is Israel. So they will be calling him Israel, 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 because his name was Israel. Okay. And he goes on to talk about his life story. Okay. So there goes another one. So this wasn't foreign to them at that space and time. This is another one. This is 1856. This is Booker T. Washington to 1915. This is Booker T. Washington, up from slavery, right? I had always sympathized with the children of Israel in their task of, so there's a connection, there's a bonding and trauma of stories of people who experienced similar things that you did and you're currently going through. This is why a lot of people look to the story of Israel for deliverance and things of that nature. And so once again, this is not only something that's coming from their one side, it was coming from different sides. Anywho, this is Booker T. Washington. Daniel H. Peterson. This is from 1812 to 1854, embracing the time period. This is before Crowdy is born. Crowdy is born in 1854, embracing the time period from 1812 to 1854, including his visit to West Africa. The Looking Glass, being a true report and narrative of the life, travels, and labor of Reverend Daniel H. Peterson, a colored clergyman. Let's see where he talks. And he talks about Israelites in Egypt. Remember, he went into the continent and he's talking about Israelites and he's talking about being delivered. So, and this is not a long one. So definitely could take a look at this here. Okay. But I'm not in the reading voice today. So I'm just keep going through, dotting and moving. This is 1804 to 1863. That's the time the person was alive. This is Charles Colclock Jones. And these are just a few. Like I said, there's over 100 and something references that they uploaded to. I pull this one up and I don't see it. Hold on. This one I don't see. I have to go back. I'm not sure. This one I found interesting. Mark Twain's illustration. This is Mark Twain, 1835 to 1910, Life on the Mississippi. And then the caption is the Israelites. Now some people could read into why this picture is saying what it's saying. Somebody would say that the person on the left, the European here, is an Israelite, or somebody else who can be looking at the picture might say that the two melanated people here are Israelites, and they're apparently in a store because he's at a little desk here, and they have something in their hand. But all the caption says here is the Israelite, and then on the subsection here it says usury. Okay, so again, this is something. This is when. This is Mark Twain. So this conversation would not have been foreign. I'm just going to keep hammering that point home. And the reason I'm hammering that point home, because it was said that, if you want to talk about history, then you have to start with Crowdy, because he's the one who brings in this thought process of, that you are the children of Israel. Crowdy was bathed in this thought process. He was bathed from hundreds of years before Crowdy. We at least see 1700 before Crowdy. Olado Equiano is before Crowdy. He's in the 1700s. So this thought is not new. This thought is not foreign, either to the slave master or to the enslaved individuals. I'll continue. This was The Light and Truth of the Slavery Iron. We read this one online, and he speaks often about it. So let's go to him. We read this one, and you could check that out on the Left Project in the video box below. You can go ahead and check that out. But according to Aaron thinks, according to reading the Bible, that God foreknew everything, and God Almighty saw that Pharaoh was determined to keep the children of Israel in bondage, and God taught such a time. And he goes on to thinking, expounding on his thoughts about Israelites and bondage and what was going on. And you have to kind of read the story to understand the personality of Aaron. He was interested. So yeah, there he goes. So the story is repeated and repeated and repeated. A sermon preached by in North Carolina, 1864, Reverend John Paris. And they go on to, in the presence of brigade for the crime of desertion. Let's see here what he's talking about. Israelites wandering once again, the sins of the nation cried unto heaven once again, and this is in the forefront of the minds of the people. I hope I'm proving my point. I'm gonna come check on y'all in a minute, but I just got a few more because I'm just gonna I don't necessarily do a dump, but just prove my point that to say that we're gonna do history and question the validity of what many people are saying in this day and time without actually going into that space and time and looking at the history would lead one to accept a false narrative. This is but W.E.B. Du Bois. He also made reference to Israelites. And why do they keep making these separate references? Because of the bondage, because of the situation, because of the desire. Even in this place, many places they called Canaan. They called Canaan land or the land of freedom when they got to certain places. I have to go look at it. I don't want to say if it's either Ohio, but there's some places that the melanated people will call Canaan land. That's their Canaan. Once they cross over River Jordan, like it'll be like the River Mississippi. So they were paralleling the whole way. Okay. What did I say I named this? What did I name this, y'all? Hold on. I named it the popular origins of Israelite parallelism in the Americas. Hopefully I'm proving my point. It was very popular. It wasn't a one-off. This is the life experience and gospel labors of Reverend Richard Allen, to which he annexed the rise and progress of the African Methodist Episcopal Church. And you'll get a lot of stuff in here. You'll get scannings. I don't know what's wrong with this one here, but you will get the actual book covers. You will get, as we saw, illustrations. There's a lot of information here. But this is another one as well. And again, it's talking about Pharaoh. So who do we think is Pharaoh? It's not just explaining away the oppression, it's identifying with something that at no other time in history happened to the degree that it happened, in such a similar way that it happened. That's another one. The Looking Glass, we went over this. I think we went over this. That's another one. This is another one. This is From Log Cabin to the Pulpit, or 15 Years in Slavery. William H. Robinson, birth 1848. Okay, so this is, and a greater blessing never was confirmed on mortals from the birth of Adam until the present day. We are taught in our Bible that God wrought miracles upon the Egyptians, brought the children of Israel over the Red Sea, preserved them in the wilderness in safety, but by and by they entered into the land of Canaan. So this was a message of hope that was preached, that oftentimes gave the people hope to continue to go on. And then you continue to see with their mind process. Another thing that I want to kind of touch on, but let me finish this up right here. So he keeps talking about the Israelites and then and now, and what now would be, their period of time. You can check that out in your own convenience. This is Henry Box Brown. If you haven't read this story is amazing right here. Henry Box Brown, he literally shipped himself to freedom, like in a box, which is crazy. But he mentions this thought of um, Israelites as well. And this one is who? Women of Achievement, written for the Fireside Schools under the auspices of Women's American Baptist Home Society. And they even mention this thought of Israelites. And so Europeans and melanated people were identifying this. This is all I wanted to prove in this particular video. that it wasn't just Crowdy who popped up. Crowdy would have popped up hearing this. This person here, lastly, let me see what I got here. Ooh. I don't know, something's happening with the coding here. The Battle of Franklin, the sketch, kind of threw off the text here, but let me see. It goes on to talk about Yankees. This is talking about Yankees and this and that. Anyway, there's 177 of these references. You definitely would take a look at them in context. See, 177 of these references. I didn't even put Israelites. Let me see how many. I only put Israel. Yeah, still 177. This is annotations for a slave girl's story being an autobiography. Let me just click this. This is 1898, a slave girl's story being an autobiography of Kate Drum Gold. And then we just look here. A comparison of the South during slavery era to Egypt when the ancient Israelites were held in bondage there. I think I came across this one. I came across this one a while ago. Yeah, page 3. It is actually a comparative analysis of the South during slave era to Egypt when the ancient Israelites were held there in bondage. The name of this, for those who just tuned in, is The Popular Origins of Israelite Parallism in the Americas. Now, some people may be like, Amuna, why are you going over this? Because A, it's of interest to me, and B, there's some information that's being put out there, and it has been being put out there for years, and all of this other information that can uh, edify the people more is not being brought out. It's made to look as though this is just a one-off and this is where it came from, and not being forthcoming, or maybe not understanding that this was within the culture, and it's just Crowdy now is coming to the front stage, but he's not the only one who had this thought process. Let me see. Let me go back to. So this is, like I said, sometimes they have the original covers. You can see A Slave Girl Story by Kate Drumgold. All right, let's see here. It said it's on page 3. Here, it's right in the beginning of the book, chapter 1. So I'll read it because it's short. Once a slave girl, I have endeavored to fill the pages with some of the most interesting thoughts that my mind is so full of, and not with something that is dry. The sketch is written for the good of those that have written and prayed that the slaves might be a free people, and have schools and books and learn to read and write for themselves. And the LRD, in his love for us and to us as a race, has ever found favor in his sight. For when we were in the land of bondage, he heard the prayers of the faithful ones and came to deliver them out of the land of Egypt. You see how she just transposed the two? For God loves those that are oppressed and will save them when they cry unto him, and when they put their trust in him. Some of the dear ones have gone to the better land, but this is one of the answers to their prayers. We, as the Negro race, are free people, and God be praised for it. We, as the Negro people, need to feel proud of the race, and I, for one, do with all my heart and soul and mind, knowing as I do, for I have labored for the good in the race, that their children might be might be the bright and shining lights. This is your ancestors, foreparents speaking of their thought process. We don't have to tell them what they was thinking. They're telling us what they were thinking. Uh, and we can see the progress that we are making in education way in a shorter time. And I think that we should feel very grateful to GOD and those who are trying to help us forward. GOD bless. Okay, then she goes on. Um, Hold on. Oh, sorry. For those who are just trying to, the name of this book is The Slave Girl's Story, being an autobiography of Kate Drumgold. Oops. And so, again, she's paralleling the experience herself. I haven't read this one. This looks interesting. I might have to. Let me see how long it is. It's not even that long, so definitely to check it out. Let me let my screen go here. So that's kind of what I wanted to share with that. I'm not even going to make it. Yeah, welcome to the discussion. It's a mouthful. For those who just joined us, I welcome, LF welcome. The popular origins of Israelite parallelism in the Americas. And why did I make this topic or bring it up? I'll show you guys again. I'll let you listen to it. I clicked it off, but I'll bring it up again. I was perusing and perusing and came across a discussion with a talking point that I often hear. And being that I've spent, I would say, a considerable amount of time researching, I mean, nowhere near what I want to be able to do because you got stuff to do. But I've spent a considerable amount of time doing some research. And this talking point of it starting with Crowdy is not a correct talking point. It's not a correct talking point, especially here in America. Like I said, a lot of speaks of it, and he's from the 1700s. Okay, he speaks of this similarity, and so it's always been a parallel throughout the time of slavery, and it's always been something that has inspired the people to be free.
Developing, there be
Hold on.
Have the first-hand stories of my parents to allow you to jump in with whatever you wanted to say.
all right.
Okay, so this is what really made me want to just share. I know to share, so let me just play this.
Cool. Peace. So I guess we gonna have to start with the history. So when we deal with the origin of the Black Hebrew Israelite theology on people who identify themselves as Jews, I'm gonna start with Williams Crowdy.
Okay, and that is, as we just saw, dealing with the history and starting with William Crowdy is not correct. It's not correct. William Crowdy he may be the one who people may gravitate towards, but he's definitely not. He's not the origin or originator of this thought that, hey, these people might be the Hebrews, or hey, I see a lot of similarities, or hey, their lives lined up. You know what I mean? They've been saying that over and over and over and over again. So, any questions or comments, feel free to ask. And if not, I had something else planned, but this one kind of came to the forefront of my mind. So I said, let me just go ahead and get that out. Any questions? Any comments? If not, I'm going to go ahead. Oh, yeah, I wanted to read this one. I didn't read it. I'm not going to share my screen, but I'm going to read this one. This one is Julia Johnson Fisher, 1814. She says, the dawn. Oh, let me speak a little bit about what she says she's eating. Let me go ahead. Where should I go? Why not? Uh, March 28th. You know what I'm going to come back and talk about too? Because I've seen, so, again, when we're talking about slavery, I find it interesting that people will spend 50 umpteen years studying Kemet and West Africa and all this stuff, but not so much time studying recent history that can be substantiated in present time. And you don't even necessarily need a plane ticket to get to some of this information. It's very nigh onto us, but we're not taking the time to go in and um, get this information that's present. That boggles my mind. But anyway, another thing that I wanted to come and talk about is this thought process of the way we reimagine slavery. I'm going to read her first, but then remind me of this way we reimagine slavery. One thing in particular is the laws against reading. Okay, and there's a context. There's a context for everything that we're seeing, but what we're doing oftentimes sadly, is we cherry pick the stuff that just sounds really, really gruesome and really, really wild and really, really crazy. And then we stun the audience and then we just keep going. Like it didn't have a context. Like that was going on all the time. Like we don't have to provide sources for the things that we're saying, which causes people not to want to go and study this part of history because it's so traumatic that they can't stomach it. And so we just allow people to come through, broad brush it, woo, do the Bob Ross, and then go on to things that, the majority of the people are not going to be able to substantiate anyway. It's doing us a great disservice because this part of history has a key to our healing. I know a lot of people may not be in it for the aim of healing, but being that I am, I had to mention that. Let me read a little bit of her book. Choop, choopy, toop, choopy, toop. Let me see when this was written. Okay. This was written. This was written in it's a diary. This is 1864. This is around the end of slavery. Do, 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 do. Where did it go? This person said August the 15th, April the 15th. Had a dish of boiled rice and dry corn for the morning, nothing on it. For dinner, soup made of beef bone and cake gave us with rice and cornbread. It is a rainy day and gloomy. My thoughts continually at the north. So this seems like it would have been a Confederate wife. I'm homesick and wonder what is my duty in regard to going, whether it be made plain to me. It seems as if I could not stay contented another year, and what shall we live on if we go north? It's a question that we cannot solve. I can hardly wait for mail to come, and yet we are disappointed week after week. Now that we have been favored with letters, I want them to come thick and fast. How long the last 3 years have been, right? They seem like a vast, uncomfortable dream. Once I wished for the lodge in a vast wilderness. I have realized the fallacy of such a wise wish. And now I'm led to say, "Oh, solitude, where are thy charms?" And she goes on bellyaching about, let me stop saying that. That's kind of what I'm gonna. She goes on complaining uh, about what's going on, and 3 years because war started 61, 60, around 61. So civil war and all of this is happening. So she goes on to say, "The day dawns upon us more cheerily out the doors, but the weather is still cold for the season. Had another corn cake and boiled rice for breakfast, but Grace came over from Kate with a piece of drumfish and a bunch of radishes for dinner, which was great luxury. Understand, remember, they were living in opulence. Many people who owned slaves and owned people were living off of their labor, sweat, and tears. So her complaining, this to me appears to be a European woman. I will look up the rest, but her complaining about what they don't have, this, that, and the third, shows that they kind of fell off, as some would say. She says, Providence does not leave us to starve in the wilderness, yet, like the Israelites, we are continually murmuring. Um, Then it goes down. Let me jump down, right? So she's saying they're acting like they were murmuring in the wilderness. She says, on the Sabbath mornings, it's April 17th. On Sabbath mornings, we look with great impatience for the mail. Today, a letter came from Fred. He was in good spirits. He had found a pair of saddle bags containing clothing and had found also pretty girl from Virginia. By the way, during the war, many people were, especially troops from the north, were ransacking the people's farms in the South. They were stealing their food, taking their animals. They was doing all kind of stuff. So it was kind of reckless. He was before Palapka in Florida and expecting a battle daily. We receive a paper also drawn up by the Camden coach suing General Gilmer for passport for us. I do not like it, and I think I will write for myself. No satisfactory news in the papers. A dish of lettuce and eggs was added to our corn cake at noon. So she was still being served. She over here hollering. She's still being served. But let me continue. With relish nicely. Last night was very cold and frost in some places. April 18th. We were called about 3 o'clock this morning to Mrs. Lynn. We hurried down and found the boy there before us. Old Nellie was officiating. Old Nellie sounds like she might be Melanie. It is a nice fat baby. The people here are quite like the Israelitish women. Again, Remember, I talked about this parallelism that happens a lot. She's saying the women here, remember, if you remember the story in Egypt, okay, another parallel, when the Egyptian pharaohs, according to the narrative, is saying to take out the male children, and the midwives come and say, they're not like the Israelite, I mean, the Egyptian women, they deliver quickly. This woman is giving this analogy saying the people here are quite like the Israelitish women. They hardly give a baby time to turn out. This is the fourth baby we have waited on since the war broke out. Our mulatto, Josie, is the prettiest baby of the three. He is handsome, cunning little fellow. So who is she talking about? Melanated people. And she's paralleling these melanated women, not just people, women, to the narrative that was happening in the Torah, where it says that they was just, turning out babies quick. Again, this is a stereotype, but this is what she's putting on the people. Okay, let me just show my screen so y'all see I ain't making this stuff up. Hold on. Because don't nobody got no time for that. Here. You see where she says it here? Nellie is officiating. She sounds like an old melanated midwife. And the baby, she says, is fat. The people here are quite like the Israelitish women. They hardly give a baby time to turn out. This is the fourth baby that we have waited on since the war broke out. Our mulatto Josie is the prettiest baby of the three. He is handsome. And she goes on. My point is the parallelisms, if that's a word, I had to look it up as I saw earlier, because I'm like, it's a word today, were, everybody quiet, they were very popular and a way of speaking and a way of referencing the people of the day, actions, behaviors, and occurrences. So I just want to get that out the way. Every time I say I'm going to be finished, I find another interesting one. Let me see. Hold on. Because just like a whole lot of them. Hold on. Hold on. This one is named. This one is paralleling again this was paralleling the bondage of Israelites in Egypt seemed a dark and inexplicable fate for the chosen children of God, but the outcome of it was the founding, forming, and cementing of the Jewish nation, he says, which was to play such an important part in all the subsequent history of the human race. He goes on to say, who can tell? And the dawning light of the divine purpose begins even now to reveal itself, but that it was to be through this means that the Almighty intends to work out the final redemption of the African race in these lands and the far-off dark continent which is now offering such fertile and inviting fields for missionaries and evangelical effort and enterprise. And then they go on. He goes on to talk. So again, this is what they had access to. He goes on to say here that just as the Israelites were liberated by the special interposition of providence, so was the Negro, and that the Negro is indeed blind to the facts of history and ungrateful to God of battles, and who does not recognize the hand of Jehovah in his emancipation. Let me let you see this one too, so you can see I am making this one up. Right here. Here goes another parallel again. Okay? And this one is written 1814-19 by John Wesley. My point being, I think I've made it. And now, secondly, let me see how long I've been running here. And pass this on as well. Pass this on, share this, do all that you have to do to help us to educate one another on some of the things that we're saying and just repeating rhetoric without, from year to year, without expanding our reach. I'm not saying I don't know the brother. I'm just coming across this particular video, but it's not the first, second, third, fourth time that this conversation has been brought forth. Now, how does how does it come to where now Crowdy is serving it up to the people? That's a different discussion. But the history of it doesn't start with Crowdy. And secondly, I was talking about the I guess I'll come back and talk about the illiteracy or the forced illiteracy, the forced um, campaign against reading, and how slavery. I come back. How slavery was an institution that grew to what it became. Like they didn't just arrive here and then boom, I got all the laws and I have all the slave codes and this is what it's going to do. That's not kind of how it's happened. Because if you understand what's going on before they get here, what happens when they get here, the European that is, the colonizer, what happens, what they encounter, and how they need to get permission in the beginning from other powers, from Pope, from other spaces, and how they're making these laws and these rules for who can be enslaved and what can happen um, from the papacy in the beginning. And then later on, it begins to come here, and then they begin to get a handle on making of these laws. And a lot of them are on the fly. And a lot of them you may see one state make a law and then the other state, because remember, it wasn't the United States at that time. So one colony is making a law and then the other colony is making a law. And this is why you have slave codes that are not exactly the same with different punishments. So I guess I'll come back and talk about that another time because I'm at 43 minutes. So with that said, I want to thank everybody for tuning in. Like I said, share this video, have the discussion, read some of the narratives, so that we won't keep saying the same thing from year to year to year to year. I know this is not the official real New Year. This is a Gregorian year that's coming till the end. But this darkness and mystery around slavery also needs to come to an end so we can move forward. That's just what I'm saying. So with that said, everybody have a blessed night. I see y'all quiet, so I'm gonna leave y'all to salat on that one. And leave your comments and your thoughts in the box below. Alrighty? Alrighty then.